Welcome back to the Rundown. Well, we just discussed Bitcoin, but now let's look at another aspect of this fast-changing digital world and online world that we live in. Tamir Pardo, the former head of Israel's famed intelligence agency, the Mossad, gave a rare public address today in Tel Aviv and had a stark warning for his audience. Nations are seriously underestimating the threat posed by cyber warfare. Despite best efforts at cyber defense, most businesses, he said, are not secure, and silent cyber warfare can do more damage than military operations. Pardo also cautioned that despite Israel's early success in cyber warfare, that advantage may not last. Here's some of what he had to say.
The big problem here is that this tool can be in the hands of the few, in lone wolves' hands, and up to the state level. And with an IQ of 140, 150, and a small amount of people could cause more damage than any Air Force could do.
We're going to look a little bit closer at those statements, that warning, what nations are missing now and what they should be doing. Oren Elimelech is Chief Information Security Officer at Israel's Ministry of Transport and Road Safety. He's also a research associate at the International Institute for Counterterror. Oren, great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It seems like what Tamir Pardo, the ex-Mossad chief, is alluding to is really part of a bigger story, which is that it's no longer about a military versus a military. It can be somebody in the shadows, so to speak, who is hired by a nation to do great damage from the comfort of his own home.
Indeed. It's basically an asymmetric warfare, which means even a small individual or a proxy, some other terror organization could be hired by nations or by countries in order to act upon their behalf and do real damage. It's a very, very low threshold to become cyber capable. It's a low capex, a low opex, and you can really build your cyber deterrent capabilities in order to have a huge effect.
Are you surprised that he says that countries aren't prepared? Because Israel, for example, we always hear about Israel really prepping in the cyber field, even training high schoolers and people younger to eventually be on top of that field. Do you think that countries and companies don't know really what they're up against? Indeed.
I believe that even though Israel is known as the cyber nation, and the recent changes in Israel, for example, the NCSA in Israel basically have advanced the capability of Israel, but other countries, and I've been traveling throughout the world, and organizations all over, whether it's Europe, where it's the state, or Africa, everywhere around the world, are underestimating this. And really, you can have a small, for example, supplier in the supply chain that is part of the hospitals, banks, insurance, and that specific organization can be damaged and have a cascading effect to other organizations. Also, organizations are not cyber capable to become cyber resilient. They're putting their effort somewhere else.
Like hospitals and institutions that tend to be a little more outdated.
And what you've seen in the attack on hospitals.
Exactly.
Pardo also did speak about Israel's advantages in the field. Let's take a listen to what he said.
Israel has very large resources in the field of cyber, disproportionate to the size of the country. The strength of Israel in this field is incredible, but if we are talking about a normal classic bell curve, then the amount of talented people is statistically almost identical in every country. In a country with 150 million people, there is no doubt that the potential there, even if not as great as in Israel, is still very high. Even if the DNA is slightly different, it's still possible to create enough talented people in these fields.
Or there is some reason for concern there, because he spoke about, again, countries with bigger populations. One that comes to mind is Iran, a country with a significantly bigger population than Israel. And this is what Israel has to do to maintain that advantage which it got because of its early lead in the field.
Israel should continue to invest, and this is what it's doing. The recent National Cyber Bureau in Israel has been initiated just 2 years ago, advancing, as you said earlier, advancing in schools, training youngsters in order to develop this. And I believe that we should always keep this ahead. The Jewish brain is always our key as capability. And I think this can make a huge effort and a huge advancement in the future.
Other than that big picture, getting people really on top of this earlier in their careers, what do you think even companies or hospitals, for example, as you mentioned, that can end up harming governments, can do now to try to keep up in a field where it's really difficult to keep up with the advancements?
Every organization, specifically critical infrastructures, hospitals, banks, but also non-criticals, should put up more expenses in order to train awareness inside the organization, put more expenses in order to build their capabilities. I don't know, allocate 8 to 10% of their IT budget in order to have more strong cyber resilience capabilities. This is important.
And the reasons why they wouldn't be doing it, is it just sort of bureaucratic inertia that may involve a lot of retraining, even bringing in new people?
A massive mentality
exactly.
shift, maybe.
It's a change of thought, because it's usually you do it only after. You had an event and then you react. Why not do it before? Prepare, because it's imminent. It's no longer a question if you'll get hurt. You're going to get hurt. It's just a matter of time.
But Oren, so you deal specifically with some of these issues with ministry and transport in Israel, and you might hear a lot of criticism here in Israel that infrastructure is really not up to par. What is Israel's transport doing to try to protect from exactly those threats?
Actually, Israel in transport has done immensely in the last 2 years. It's been the case earlier, but we just recently, just last week, we had a conference gathering around 80 organizations in the transport field here in Israel. And we're trying to put up a cyber resilience capabilities to every one of those, whether if it's naval, airborne, ports, harbors, transit, trucks, everywhere, because it's important. This is a critical infrastructure. Imagine this country going to a standstill because of a cyber attack.
What are the biggest challenges you've come up against in trying to reform what are pretty old systems?
Exactly. So thank you for saying that, because some systems are so ancient, they need to be replaced, they need to be updated. And to get people to do that change is part of the big hurdle that we're having. That change of minds, shifting him to understand a threat is no longer like an earthquake or a typhoon or tornado, can be also a cyber.
I can just think of the challenges, for example, in the field of air traffic control. Israel is sort of an island, a landlocked island, is so dependent on air travel, and that must be a huge challenge.
It's a huge challenge. Until recently, we only had one major Ben Gurion airport, and now that has been with Ramon also next to Eilat. And Israel is isolated. We're dependent on air and naval, and because of that, we're surrounded by nemesis and adversaries. We need to be able to protect ourselves, but also in cyber, we have every day, people don't know this, we're being attacked thousands of times every day.
The bottom line, Oren Elimelech, from what I take, is first a mentality shift, then put the money in it, and don't get too overconfident.
Right.
Exactly.
Oren Elimelech, thanks very much for being here. We're going to go out for a quick break, but a little bit of Christmas spirit when we're back. Don't go anywhere.